let's just start with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we have also forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and power and glory forever. Amen. So I'm going to start off with, if anybody wants to share a story of them being able to share the gospel with somebody within the last couple of months. Okay with that. Okay, Ty.
I normally, so I had like 2 months off of work due to COVID, and normally don't like get to interact with my neighbors that often. But I was in the laundry room at like 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, which I would normally be at work at 11 a.m. And he's always doing laundry at 11 a.m. on Tuesday because he has worked all the rest of the week, and that's his like day off. And just got to share with him, who runs a local brewery. Just got to share with him about the gospel. Just a quick God, man, Christ response. Maybe lasted for about 10 minutes before his laundry was folded, and then he left. But since then, we've got to talk with him, and it was really like God ordained experience. I think, just considering like I never would have been there at that point.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you use Bella?
So I did Awana, and we had a competition out of state, and they had art contests. So I would always make a painting based on like the Bible verse that like revolved, like it was the main theme of the competition. And I had an art show in December, and some of my dad's coworkers came in. Not a lot of them were Christians, but it was just really interesting. Like they kind of gravitated towards like the paintings based on Bible verses, and one lady was just like, "Tell me about this painting." So I told her it was based off of Matthew 5:14. And she was like, "Well, just like tell me the whole story and the symbolism." So I was able to share with her, and she was like, "That's really great. I'm a Christian, but my son isn't. So I want to buy this painting with the story attached to it, so I can like share with him." So
That's awesome. Anybody else share in this Corona time? Kat.
I have a coworker, and she has some different life choices. Anyway. And usually I would have thought I would have been able to have had like conversations with her. Like, I don't know, like I was just fearful. I didn't know what my interactions with her were going to be like, but we worked together like one-on-one most of the time. And she just like has, like, I think my faith like has come up a couple of times, and she just like was intrigued by that, and like she like believes in God, but she wouldn't call herself a Christian, and like I don't know. And so we've had the opportunity to like talk about the gospel, and like she's interested, and like she's just like shared a lot of her life. And it's been really cool. So I'm excited about how God is going to continue to like enable conversation and stuff. But we've gotten to have some gospel conversations.
Luke?
Can I share like an attempt? But
Yeah, go for it. Share an attempt.
so I'm on the discussion board, right? We're in a good time. And I was just like using all available assets, So like you guys, my little follow group, just like checking in. This guy Matthew responded, and I just like left my number, and I was like, I'm gonna share the gospel with this guy, and like I'm gonna do this, and it's just like over text, it's just really, really hard to establish that. So just like, yes, I think it's just interesting, and like that desire being there, and yeah, that no follow through on that, and it's like the Lord is able to open doors and He's able to close doors. So, and the Lord's timing, not ours. And so, just like realizing, like, keep being faithful, and if the Lord will open the door, then He will open the door. And so we just keep trying, trusting His faithfulness for that. Yeah.
Thanks. One more.
Let's see. One of the guys that I've been able to that I knew from high school. We've been meeting up off and on throughout last semester and continuing on doing this, but it's kind of cool to be able to go through the word of it with him. I don't know, I definitely feel like God's after him for sure. He mentions like he'll pray and they're at work like, God, please, where did I misplace this bolt or things like that. And like they'll just start rolling towards me. It's like I don't know what's going on. But yeah, I think it's kind of been cool to see his eyes kind of be open more to this. I wouldn't say he's a believer or he's entrusted his life to the Lord, but yeah. So just being like,
That's awesome. Yeah, so I'm super encouraged. All your stories of just being faithful to share in the opportunities that God gives you. I think it's really hard sometimes because I'm sure there's a few people that are like bold and speaking out and sharing. And then I know there's a good handful of you in this room who are like, why isn't that a part of my life? Like, I didn't share, or like, how are people finding these opportunities to share? Like, why isn't this gospel oozing out of us every single day, every moment? Like, why aren't we reaching 3-4 people every single day? Like, why not? And so I think just like from hearing Kyle talk a lot about this abundant life that we have in Christ, I think we see that's a response, right? Like discipleship, like Megan was saying, that's a response to having an abundant life in Christ. And I think evangelism is the same. Like it's a response that we have to having an abundant life in Christ. And I think it's really hard. Like I know if I picked a couple of you, like if I said, tell me who you shared with yesterday, would you be like, I don't want to, or like, I can't think of anybody, and I think especially now in this time, like we are in a world pandemic, to use like the words that other people are using, like whether you agree with it or not, like the world says we are in a pandemic. We are living in a culture where there's social injustices that are happening. We're living in a time where, it's like you can't escape something hard on the news. We're living in a time where like social media, friends, family, like you just see division everywhere. And I think it's easy for us to think like, I need to like dig my heels further down into this and like make my voice known, or we can live out of the abundant life and say, I need to make God's kingdom known, right? Like, I think that's like, I was asking like, God, like what message do you want me to give to these students? Because if I have to convince you that evangelism is good and we should be evangelizing and sharing the gospel with lost people, like, I don't know why you're in this room, like I know all of you guys, I would hope all of you guys believe that evangelism is essential for the proliferation of our faith. Like it is essential for God's kingdom for us to share the truth. That's how we became believers. That's how we are in this like situation of having confidence in our salvation, is because somebody shared that with us. And so how do we expect other people to know that if we're not sharing that with them? So I think like, we could go through the whole Bible and be blue in the face of like, just knowing like, okay, evangelism is essential and we need to evangelize to others. So that's not really like the message that I think God was like, Gayle, you really need to make sure they know like evangelism is good and essential. And like, God, I think they know that, I think you guys know that. And hearing so many of you guys talk about your stories of sharing with friends, coworkers, classmates, for, family, like, I think, like it's essential. So that's not what this message is about. I think this message is more about like, how are you sharing today? Right? Like, Kyle mentioned there's an evangelism team. You don't have to be on the evangelism team to evangelize. Yes, it's going to give you some great tools to help you. Yes, I think it's really important for us as a ministry to have these opportunities to talk and share and be encouraged and challenged by one another and say like, oh, like, gosh, Jana's been sharing with somebody from her church. Like, that's awesome. She's checking in with this guy. And like, what am I doing? Like, there was somebody that came to my church last week, and I don't know if they're a believer. Like, did I take that time? Like, I think just hearing that story and hearing that message is really important for us as a BSU, us as a ministry to hear and like to challenge. And like, are your conversations centered around those kinds of things? Or are your conversations centered around, gosh, this mask is so annoying to wear. Like, I hate wearing this mask. It's so stupid. It's so dumb. And I'm like preaching to the choir. I'm like fiddling with my mask all the time. But I'm like, but am I talking more about that? Or am I talking more about like, this is what I'm learning at church. This is what, like, this is who Patrick is sharing with at work. This is who I'm sharing with, you know, online or whatever it is. So I think, just to reiterate what Megan said about discipleship, I will say the same thing about evangelism, is that it is biblical and it is non-negotiable. So there's that. I think that like we need to look at how have we responded to this time? Like, how do we respond to how have we responded to this pandemic? How have we responded to political injustices? Like, are we more focused on ourselves? Have we been more focused on political parties? Have we been more focused on governments and county policies? Or have we been more focused on our neighbors, on God's kingdom, you know? And so I think we're just going to dive into Hebrews 13 right now. Like God led me to this passage because I remember in college just really being convicted, hearing this from Bobby when he preached through Hebrews, and really just being like, it was like a light bulb that turned on. I was gonna say clicked. Both can work, I guess. So if you're in Hebrews, it's Hebrews 13. I'm going to read 8 through 16. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Do not be led away by diverse and strange teachings, for it is good for the heart to be strengthened by grace, not by foods which have not benefited those devoted to them. We have an altar from which those who serve the tent have no right to eat. For the body of those animals whose blood is brought into the holy places by the high priest as a sacrifice for sin are burned outside the camp. So Jesus also suffered outside the gate in order to sanctify the people through his own blood. Therefore, let us go to him outside the camp and bear the reproach he endured. For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come. Through him, then, let us continually offer up a sacrifice to praise to God, that is, the fruit of lips that acknowledge his name. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. You might be thinking, oh, it's sort of weird that you are talking about like blood sacrifices, animal sacrifices, when like I could have just shared like verse 16. Do not neglect to do good and share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. Like, I could have just left it at that and been like, okay, just do good and share what you have, guys. And that's my message, and that's it. But I just really wanted you to see, like, this is a passage about worship. Like, how are we as God's people worshiping God? Are we actually believing who he is? Are we going to him and seeing who Jesus is? Like, it says he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is unchanging. He is not like the gospel that you preach to the person that is a spiritual person, like what Katharina was saying, like a spiritual person who might believe in God. Like, the gospel still applies to them the same. Like, Jesus is the same to them as the person that is in Jana's church who's like maybe heard this and knows this, but is like, I don't know. The gospel is the same to that person. The same way it's the same to Luke's friend who he's like, I'm just trying to share some sort of message with this guy. Like, we don't know his background. He could be an atheist. He could be a Buddhist. He could be whatever, like he could be Christian. Is he? He's not. Luke knows he's not, so we're going to say he's not a Christian. But it's like the gospel, Jesus is the same to him, like, so we don't have to rack our brains over how do I share with this person? God, like, how do I twist your message to make it applicable to this person? Like he says right here, like he's applicable. Like in all situations, he's the same. He's not going to change. It's not like if I have somebody who's identifies as being transgender, I don't have to be like, oh, how do I change Jesus to make him look more appealing to this person versus like my neighbor who is a believer-ish, but I don't really know. Like Jesus is the same. Like take comfort in that, like we don't have to. I think that's one of the things that prevents us from sharing the gospel is just this fear of thinking, I don't think I know how to share because I don't know this person well enough. Like I don't know their struggles. I don't know where they're coming from, but it's like, you don't have to know that. Jesus, and he knows that person. Like he is able to overcome your like deficiencies, So I think the other thing that God really taught me through this passage also is just this idea of like Jesus who suffered outside the gate. Like he was an outcast. Not only was he an outcast from his own people, he went to the outcasts. Like he went to those that were outside of the gate. And he was also forced out by his own people because people didn't understand him. And so just thinking like, man, who are we sharing with? Are we only sharing with people that look like us? Are we only sharing with people who think like us, who talk like us, who, it might be just easier to share with because you're like, well, okay, like this girl I grew up with and she went to church with me, but she sort of has fallen away. But I know the words to say to this person so they'll get it. Like I feel like, man, I do that. I'm guilty of that all the time. Like, oh, like if I could just like this really clicked with me. So like I can really like use this to then like make it click with them. And then it's like, are you treating this person like a project then? Like, are you just thinking like, I just need to say the right words that somebody said to me and then it'll click with them? Or are you really seeing like, no, like Jesus is the same for them as they were for you, and the same with somebody that looks completely different than you? Like, are we so afraid to go outside the gate, outside the camp to somebody that looks completely different than us and say like, I can share with you confidently the message of Jesus, because just like what I think Kyle has been talking about over and over and over again, of just like we're called to love God and we're called to love other people. Like we're called to put others above ourselves. Like he was talking about last night, the 10 commandments, and it's like the first 5 you can sort of generalize into like how do we love and worship and honor God, and then the last 5 are sort of how do we do that in the midst of people. And so just seeing evangelism is something like that, of like how are we worshiping God and how are we loving other people. Like, and in Hebrews 8 or Hebrews 13, I think it's very clear, like we are called to love people that don't look like us. We're called to love the outcasts. We're called to love just people that we think, man, this message, I don't see how this message could impact them, but it does. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think there was just thinking out loud. I remember Tyler, our friend overseas, he came and spoke at our church, and something that he said was just really convicting and impactful. And it was just like, is there anybody in your life that you're discounting? Is there who in your life are you just like, they're too far for you to reach God? You know, like that, like I can reach this neighbor, but like that neighbor, there's no way they're going to give up their lifestyle. There's no way they're going to give up their sin, their pride, their idols. There's just no way that they're going to do that, God. So it's like, who in your life are you discounting and thinking like, I can't reach them. Like I can't get to them. And I think it just takes a lot of understanding on like your side. Like I think that's something that we all can grow in, is like, how do I understand somebody who's different than me? How do you understand your classmates who, you know, are waving their rainbow flags this month because it's Pride Month? Like, how many of you are like, oh, another rainbow flag? Like, that's disgusting. I hate that. And all this stuff. It's like, I understand the sentiment behind that, but like, you're not going to reach people that way. You're not going to reach people with disgust. You're not going to reach people with a dismissive attitude or a dismissive heart of like, ugh, like they're this or whatever. Like they associate with this movement. They associate with this political agenda. I could never. Like I could never. Like that's too far gone. And I need to like dig into my ideals and myself. And it's like, no, like dig into what Jesus is saying here in Hebrews. Like, go to those people, love those people. Not only that, but what does he say? He says, do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. So I'm sorry, this was like very sporadic. A lot of these notes I'm like sort of jumping around, but I'll share a couple of stories. I'm also trying not to cry, just because I'm Gayle and I get very emotional when I talk about spiritual things. And I'm just realizing some of it comes from my Korean nature. Like I feel like Koreans are sort of known for being very emotional, and I'm like, I was like, that's why my mom was always crying when she prayed. She gave that to me. But it's not a bad thing. So anyways, I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable, but trying to deflect, drink some water, take a breath. So yeah, I thought, man, it's really unfair of me to ask you guys like what stories, or like give me stories of like you evangelizing. And I'm like, I'm not going to evangelize though. Like, and it's really easy. Like, I feel like I'm in a bubble of Christians. Like, I'm one of those people that I'm like, I'm safely in the gates, you know, like I love my church. I serve in my church. I love this ministry. This is where I'm blessed to have a job. Most of my friends are believers. Most of my family are believers. So I'm just like, ooh, God, you've safely kept me in this like city, this bubble, and I'm not going to do. And just like feeling this wave of conviction of like, are we like Jesus in that, like, we're actually going outside of the gates. Like, we're suffering with those, I'm losing it, with those that are suffering. Are we doing that? And I think, like, Kyle asked last night again, like, what out of this time has been, or what has this time been like? And I'm like, the reason why I feel this time has been so fruitful for me is because God just really convicted me of this bubble, this city that I've built for myself. And I haven't been the first to be like, I want to be like, Jesus, I want to suffer in your name, and I want to be with those that are suffering. I'm so quick to say, I don't want to suffer with those that are suffering, because they're suffering for the wrong reasons, God. Like, they're not suffering for your name. They're suffering because they're this. They're suffering because they choose this. They're suffering because, of governments, not because of me, not because of you. So like, why should I care about their suffering? And it's like, shame on me. Like, not just shame, but just conviction in my heart of lack of compassion, lack of understanding. So these are my stories, and I hope that these stories are things that convict you and bring hope into, like, this is a time where y'all can actually see that the like harvest is plentiful. The like ground is fertile, so fertile right now to share your faith, because of the climate that our country is in. Like, it is just overwhelming and so sweet to see like God's conviction in my life and bringing that around and like producing sweet, sweet fruit. So, like back when all the like Black Lives Matter stuff started happening, like God just really taught me a lot of what was what was going on. He opened my eyes to some things. He made me listen. He made me do research. He made me learn a lot. He made me pray the most that I've ever prayed, I think, for years. And so one of the things that came out of that conviction of just like not suffering with those that are suffering, is just like, God, like, I don't understand this cry. Like, I don't, and it's not that I haven't wanted to, I've been apathetic towards it. And so just like reaching out to those that are not like me. And so one day on good old Instagram, I messaged this girl who was organizing an event for like a Black Lives Matter event thing. Or it wasn't the organization, so we don't have to talk about that. It's just she cares about Black lives. She's organizing an event, and I wanted to say, how can I serve? How can I step in? And I just messaged her. I was like, I don't know how to help, but like I would love to help. In my heart, I was like, we might not agree on everything, and that's okay. I'm sure Jesus didn't agree with everything that the woman at the well was doing, but he still went and saw her, like he still went out of his way to see her. And so just talking to this girl, this woman, like, she was like, we need candles. I was like, okay. So like, I'm like, I can find some candles for this event. So I'm like messaging churches, because I'm like, they have candlelight services. There's like 3 churches in town that like got back to me, and they're like, we have candles, like come by, pick these candles up. So I'm driving across Albuquerque, bringing candles, all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, here's this huge box of candles. They were donated to you and then like by these churches who love you, who care about this. And we see you, we love you, we want to serve, in any way, shape, or form. And she was just like, thank you so much. I'm like, great. That was like the first instance. And I was just like, I don't know why I was sweating. I don't know why I was like so afraid of doing this thing. But that opened up a door to then talk to this girl about the gospel in other ways. Like, she'll post things and I'll respond and I'll say, oh, can you explain this to me? Like, with me, like, this is my worldview and this is how I see this. And like, your worldview is saying something else. Like, help me understand you. It's not that I agree with you. It's not that I'm treating you like a project and think, oh, I really need to like then come up with like a counterpoint to this point and like say that's wrong or anything like that. And so it just like, I've been able to share the gospel with her, share truth with her, love her, pray for her, like hear her hurt, her genuine hurt and pain, and like be there with her and like cry with her through messages on a phone. So I'm like, that's one thing. Then I'm like, if you think, God, I can't do anything because we're in a pandemic and I, whatever, it's like, go online, talk to people, share the gospel. If If you're not online, that's fine. You don't have to be online. This isn't a plug for like, get social media. If you're off it, kudos to you. That's great. But just like, because I was on it and I'm like, I'm convicted of using this time wisely for God, like I need to then be able to share my faith and not just get mad at things that she posts, not just say, ugh, I don't agree with that and I can't understand that, so I'm you and be off. It's like, no, like help me understand you. So it's like developing a real genuine friendship with somebody who looks completely different. They're completely on this side of the spectrum. They are queer, they're Black, they're, somebody that has laughed about Christians and the things that we believe, but we've been able to start a conversation. So she's on this side. The other side of things is my friend from high school, who I don't know where she's at as a believer, but we have kids that are like about the same age. Her husband is a police officer. She's fearful for his life. And so like here I am, I'm like learning so much about this and I'm like, oh yeah, like this is really important. But then here's my other friend who's on this side and she's like, I'm fearful. And my first reaction to that is, your husband chose that. Like, who cares? What's a blue life? Is that a Smurf? I can joke about that, but that's equally as sinful for me to do that, equally. So God convicted me of that and say, go reach out to this friend, Gayle. Like, go try to understand her and like be there for her and love her as equally as you are with this girl. So I'm like, okay, God, like texting her, hey, I hope this is your same number from high school. And she's like, yep, it is. And then just like having this conversation of like, I see you, I hear you, I'm hearing your pain and I want to understand you and I'm praying for you. Like, here's some truth that has given me comfort. I hope it gives you comfort. She's like, I'm crying right now because you reached out and like, nobody's done that and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, here are two completely different women on different sides of the spectrum, but like Jesus is the same for both of them. Like Jesus is the same and his gospel reaches them the same way. So it's just funny because I'm just like, I never thought I could reach this person with truth. I never thought I could reach this person with truth. Like I just never thought, but it's like, it's Jesus that does it. It's not me. Like my personal beliefs are probably somewhere like in the middle, like just waiting out here trying to be like, what's right? What's wrong? I don't know. But like, I just realized like God speaks to me the same way as he speaks with this girl and this girl. And just seeing how like it took a pandemic, it took political, social division, unrest, all this stuff for me to just really see like, are we going out into our city? Are we going outside of the city gates to reach people that don't look like us? And I think like you guys especially are in a stage of life where you see that on campus, you see that everywhere, people having differing views. There's no unity in those views also, like left or right, there's no unity on both sides. And it's just funny because it's just like Jesus unifies all of that. So hopefully that's a good just like encouragement and conviction of like, just do something. Like something is better than nothing. Call somebody up on the phone, have an awkward conversation with them, text somebody, message a stranger over social media, like do whatever you can to get Jesus's name out there. But not just that, like don't view people as projects, but really seek to understand them the way that Christ sought to understand the people that were outcasted, the way that Jesus sought to be with the woman at the well, who was also an outcast, and like love her and see her and know her and speak to her. And just really like, that's my challenge, is like evangelize to those that look like you and those that don't look like you and people that are just in between. So